mean that you've done some courses. Now that could be great as well. So the pink therapy group, so my supervisor is the guy who runs pink therapy, and he'll always say to me, you shouldn't really be seeing me, you need to go to America and see whatever, but it doesn't help me. It doesn't, God, it sounds so egotistical, doesn't it? It doesn't help me. If we have a doctor, they play bingo with me sometimes, and Laura will be the one shouting it because Cherry's missing today. I mention a few things a few times. I've looked at 2 particular PhDs. They will make me an expert in those particular areas. Epigenetic and transgenerational scripting of submissive women, and or shame as a moral compass for retroactive withdrawal of consent are the 2 things I'm quite interested in. Loads of words there, sorry. What the fuck is that?
I'm interested in reading those dissertations.
I'd love to read them, but I don't want to write them. So one is like, am I born this way as a submissive woman, or is there something to do with my environment, my genetics, what's going on there? And the other one is, what is it about moral shame, which we use for doctors and soldiers when they have terrible issues after maybe killing or hurting, you're all within the law. And then they feel that they've made a mistake and they, feel really bad about it. And we can do that. We see retroactive withdrawal of consent on the scene quite often. I wish I hadn't done that. I feel really bad. You shouldn't have made me do that. No, you consented. So we need to own our consent. It's really important to understand that there may be a problem when we consent. So I would want to see a therapist who gets me, who's willing to understand me, who can ask me questions. And the thing I ask a therapist when I want to see a therapist isn't any of that. It isn't even your qualifications. I know a couple of therapists who, many years ago, the guy that taught me couples therapy, so I'm talking about 10, 12 years ago, he wasn't qualified in those days. Saying those days, it was only 12 years ago. Probably one of the best couples therapists I'll ever meet. Knowledgeable, fantastic, capable, really good at what he did. And he can still practice. There is no legal thing in the UK, let's get this straight, there is nothing that stops anyone from calling themselves a therapist. We think psychologist is protected, it's not quite, actually, that's not true. So you call yourself a psychotherapist, a therapist, or a counsellor and have 0 qualifications whatsoever. And then people say, but I belong to the BACP. So? I'm sorry, I'm very much a so with that. It's a governing body, so is COSRIT. So I can name you about 30 off the top of my head right now that say these. So there's nothing legal. And the BACP and the UKCP are fighting for the rights of that, but they're not government registered yet. And if you're BACP accredited, what that means is that you wrote an essay for your peers to be reviewed. That's it. Does that mean anything? If you've done BACP courses and if you've done all the right sorts of things, then what's good enough? So for me, just someone saying that is not enough. What do you mean? What's your history? I say kink active, but again, my activity could get in the way of our relationship because I have a concept of what submissive means. I have a concept of what dominant means. I have concepts, I have ideas. So I want to work with someone who will be open-minded. So like I'll often say in therapy and with couples as well, when someone says, I want someone who is faithful, let's go with that word. And I go, great, what does that mean? And they look at me like I'm a fucking idiot. I know what it means in the fucking dictionary, but I don't know what it means to you. What are you looking for? And often in couples therapy, you find that most of the problems we have in communication is when we use words, but we don't reconcile their meaning with each other. We don't reconcile, and our expectations get in the way of everything. So if you're going to go and see a therapist, for me, again, really personal, I want to find someone who's challenging. I want to find someone who wants to get to if this is the issue I've come to therapy with, often there is an underlying issue. And this came up because of the underlying issue. Let's say this is anorexia, depression. Let's say this is anxiety, stress. People come off, they go, yeah, I want this fixed. Don't you want this fixed? Because if we get this sorted, these things will never pop up again. This is great, but this is the basic work. This is the stuff that really makes a difference. So I want someone who's going to do this, not literally. Clearly, that'd be weird. And I want someone who has a good ethical moral compass. I want to find out what that means. And to me, the most important question I'll ask isn't about your qualifications. I want to know how many hours of personal therapy you've had. That's my big question. Have you done your journey? Because what you find is, if you qualify to be a counsellor, it's a 2-year course on average. And you have to have done 40 years of therapy each year, roughly 40, 42, varies. That's 80 hours of therapy. Most of my clients have more than 80 hours of therapy. I'm quite a long-term therapist. I can be a year, 2 years, 3 years with some people, and 3 months with others, and 4 weeks with others. So what have they done in their journey? I'm curious. I don't want to know exactly. I don't want to know about your problems or your issues. I want to know that you've had quite a few hours and you've done some kind of journey and you've got some kind of understanding of the process. If you've done it to tick box and you've done your 80 hours, I'm curious. Or I'm like, why? You profess that this works, but you don't follow it yourself. So they're the sort of questions that I ask. And are you in supervision? And who is your supervisor? And what's your process for complaints? If I've got a problem, who else do I go to and what do I do? Does that help at all?
Yeah, it does.
Very welcome. So sorry. I'm going to sit down. Sorry, I'm separating you.
Sorry. Do you want a full house or shall I shut?
No, you can shut it. So I hope that answers most of your. Is it brought up any other questions for you? Is there anything else you want to ask from that, or? Yeah. I mean, if you want to go, I'll come back to you in 1 second. If you want to go somewhere like the Pink Therapy has a set of registered people, I'm not on that register, even though my supervisor covers, that's his business. I'm not on it. I'm not paying £80 a year to register on something when I don't need to. No offence, I don't have that many spaces ever. So I don't need to do that. So just because I don't do it doesn't mean I'm not that person. So that's interesting too. So that's something to think about. There are many registered lists where maybe someone's done something or done a different course. So there are some good ones around. You're going to ask.
Is kink therapy expensive?
I think the answer isn't is kink therapy expensive. You're asking is therapy expensive, and the answer is yes. I get it. So like, and why? Let's have a look at that. So for someone like me, if I've done my different degrees. I have an MSc in psychotherapy. I have an MBA, and I have a normal degree. I also have done 7.5 postgraduates of 2 years each. And with all the therapy that I've had, that's probably around it's probably about 200 grams worth of learning that I've done, including my own therapeutic journey amongst that time. I reckon that's cost me about 200 grand all in. Honestly, just open it, you're fine, just go for it. You know, when someone's like, someone's just about to eat popcorn and they're like, you're fine. So yes, therapy is expensive. And actually, is that right? Oh, that's a difficult one. I think it's a very difficult one. Do I think I should be paid what I'm worth? Yes, I do. I think I've got a lot of experience and I'm pretty good at what I do. I'm not the best. I never will be. People aren't. You know, wouldn't it be lovely if we could all do it for a hell of a lot less than free? So in order to compensate for that, if you want to come and see someone like me, I actually, from my experience, I undercharge. I charge £70 for a single session and £90 for a couples or a polycule. Or a family, and whatever. And like you say, fucking hell, undercharge, are you fucking kidding me? You know, there are therapists in London who charge 120, 150, 200. They're often psychologists who, counselling psychologists, or they have a slightly different form of, they're under a different psychology banner. If you go and try and see someone from a charity or whatever, what you're normally going to get is someone who's training. They, you know, are just starting out, they're getting their experience. They could be better than me. They really could. You know, they could be way better. They could be better than any of us who are therapists. I charge somewhere in the middle for my experience and where I am. However, to make up for that, every other Thursday night, I run there's someone out there. Every other Thursday night, I run a free workshop for therapists and or anybody who wants to come. So anybody who's LGBTQI kinky, they're completely free of charge. You get 2 hours on Zoom, and they're questions that people have asked me, and I cover them just like this. You get 2 hours every other week. I also have a long waiting list for this, but I see 2 clients a week for free as well. One who is kink-based and one who is a child. So a lot of us do our bits as well to try and make sure that we cover everything for everyone. And a lot of us will do that, but therapy is expensive. I mean, your likelihood of getting it on the NHS is it's
7 sessions and given out.
It's difficult, and you have to really push for it, and you have to present some really serious life-threatening issues. But in your area, you'll have charities like Time to Talk, and it depends where you live and what you've got around you. You'll also find where people are studying often that there are charities as well where you pay less for your therapy. Again, we've all got waiting lists for that sort of stuff. I reckon my waiting list for my 2 free spots is around 5 years at the moment, the way it's going. It's crazy. And I won't take more than 5 people on it because that's unfair. So I say, I'm really sorry. I'll let you know if ever, and then hopefully you found someone else by then anyway. So yes, it is expensive. Can you do a lot for yourself? Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? My problem with a self-help book or working it through yourself is that our minds aren't trained. Like the shit I put myself through is really shitty. And when I take it to therapy, I go, and then it's really interesting to process that because you've got someone else's mind that is trained, that does look at this and can see you in a different way. Because we often read from our own frame of reference. When we read a self-help book, we often miss the paragraph that really impacts us. So we have to look at those things. So that's important. So yeah, therapy is expensive.
I have a quick question. So I've kind of got the deal down on like how to open up the floor to discussing kink with like new partners and vetting that sort of process. But do you have any sort of recommendations for how to open that up when there is like mental illness involved as well? Because I know it makes things a bit more difficult.
I honestly think if you've got it down as how to vet and get that right, fucking hell, you're better than me. Because honestly, I don't think vetting is ever down. I think we do the best job we can. I think it's really hard to find somebody. Like the problem is with kink and poly is that we think it's a huge, expansive area. It isn't. The amount of LGBTQI people in the UK is around 6% of us. 6%. If you go out there, in here, that's nearly all of us. But if you go out there, it's 6% for a start. And then we start talking about kink, and people think we mean a little bit of like turn left in Ann Summers, rather than anywhere else. Like my kink is I'm a cut queen. I want you to fuck other people. And people go, that's fantastic. No, there's a cost to that. The way I like to be told what I want from that and what it means to me, we need to negotiate that. Yeah, can't just go off and fuck someone else and have unsafe sex or do all these things. And I think we do need really frank, honest conversations. We're British, well, partially British, of course, Swiss passport as well. That's not much better. If you are British, like the English people, we're not very good about talking about this sort of shit. There's a really interesting book called Reading the English. And when her name's Kate, I can't remember her name, when she wrote the book, she was asked, did you have any trouble with any paragraphs, with any sections in your book? And she said yes. The one on money. English people don't talk about money. If I say to you, what do you earn every year?
£2,000.
But most people in the UK will go, wow. I don't think you should judge anyone on their money. If someone earns a shit ton of money, especially over the average, they get 120 grand a year. And it's a form of boasting or something. Or people on lower incomes feel very ashamed sometimes, or embarrassed, or worried about what the impact is. We don't like to share that. We also don't talk about death. So the bit on grief and death. You all right? Yeah, I'm fine. My mum died last year. Was I fine? No. Was I shit as luck? She was an awesome woman. She's a real fucking perfectionist, pain in the arse, and a bit of a martyr. I know all of her stuff. She was also an awesome mum, and I miss her terribly. Have I done my grieving? Yes. And does it impact me every day? Yes. That's the real life of it. So it's money, and it's also about sex. If you go to a doctor's, the average statistic is if you smoke or drink, we tend to halve that for the doctors. So if the doctor says, how many do you smoke a day? Half is cleaning, maths isn't my strong point. And if you say, like, how many units do you have a week? 15. How much sex do you have? Oh, every day. Once a week. The average sex life in the UK is around once a week. On average, for around 7 minutes. 7 minutes. That includes foreplay and everything else as well.
You do it twice.
Twice, yeah. I'll just do it by myself. Takes me 4. I just feel I've just been time efficient. Right, so the thing is, like, trying to bring up those conversations. Now, when it comes to kink, there are a lot more people interested in kink, especially since 50 Shades of Grey. Whether you like 50 Shades or not, I watched the 2 films the other night. I'd fuck him. I'm sorry, I would, and I'd certainly fuck her. So, and would I mind that he whisked me off in his helicopter and didn't quite consent night? No, I fucking wouldn't. So of course that's not right, I get it. But what's interesting is the sale of nipple clamps went up by 2,000% that month. My curiosity is, what sort of nipple clamp did you buy? The ones with the tassels, when we do that, that's fine. Those alligator clips you think you can just pull off and not have your nipple in it, I've now got a problem. So, knowledge is really important. So I think people are more open to kink. I think ethical non-monogamy is really hitting the headlines in the last few years. So there's a lot of people interested in ethical non-monogamy. I don't think they know if it hits them in the face like a wet fish. Because a lot of people who want ethical monogamy actually really mean that they want solo poly, they don't want to commit and they're out of relationships. And man, I was saying this before everybody came in, a few people were in, but I'm on a few dating sites and because I'm single. And the amount of people I meet that say, I want a CNC, full-blown, intimate, I can do what I like, have a good time, I really want to get in there but I don't want any commitment and I just want it to be casual. I can't put those two together in my head. I can't. And no, not I can't, I don't want to. Yeah. Again, I don't really see those as particularly ethical. If you're going to just do a play session or whatever, that's completely different. But you want consensual, non-consented, do what you like. To me, what that means you taking the condom off, fuck off. Or that means you, with your hepatitis, fisting me with your long nails, fuck off. We have to think about those things. So I think people are really open to it. We can make it light. Hey, listen, I've always fancied something a bit alternative. Are you open to that? And I think we can have those conversations. But I don't think we have the long-term conversations really about ethics. And I don't think we have the good long-term conversations about honesty. I mean, polyamorous relationships still involve cheating.
Yeah.
There's no difference. Loads of people in poly cheat. Loads of people in kink cheat. And we find that quite shocking sometimes, as if we're above everybody else. We're not. And those things go really wrong. So those things that we talk about are really important. I think you've just got to be brave enough to bring it up. And I think we've got to bring it up fast. I've done lots of, not research, but questions in these workshops whereby I say, if you do have a serious mental health problem, at what point should you bring it up? Look, in a relationship, people say within the first 3 months. If I find out that you have I remember seeing somebody who had very serious depression and sexual issues. And I'm really open to that. I don't have a problem with anyone having issues. I have a problem if they're going to fuck all about it. That's when my problem starts to come in. So I said, really happy to carry on seeing you. Are you doing anything about it? No. Right. But it's going to impact me. The fact that you're not awake at night, you can't have a conversation, you can't come inside a woman. They make a difference to me. I quite like someone offloading in my cunt, quite old-fashioned like that, throw my cunt old-fashioned on me from that perspective. And I like the idea of being dumped in because I feel like a good, worthless whore at that moment, for whatever reason, in a very positive way. It's not detrimental to me or my well-being, but I like humiliation, so I really love that feeling. So the fact that he doesn't or can't may have an impact on what I like as well. So I want you to be aware and cautious of that. So I said, not a problem. Let's say in this next 3 months that you agree that you'll go and see someone, so you're actively doing something about that. I absolutely will, says he. We get to December, which is the 3 months. I'm diagnosed with cancer at that moment. Don't know if I'm going to live or die. It was a great Christmas, I'll tell you. I know. But on the 23rd, so I didn't hear anything till so much later. And he was at my house and he hadn't done something for himself again. And that's how I felt, again. And I just looked at him and I said, so it's been 3 months, you haven't sorted it and we're here again. And I said, I would like you to leave. And you can't be serious, I was going to look after you. I don't need looking after, mate. I don't need another child. I really don't. Go. And I looked after myself. I did contact someone who's an old friend and said, could you please beat the fucking shit out of me before I start having surgery and or chemo? And I had a great night. I mean, with an unreliable, shitty human, but great physically. So, not a great person, but a great facility. Yeah. And that was lovely. And so it's really important. So mental health is interesting because for me, if you're going to start to play with someone, so if we're talking about kink and mental health, I want to know what's going to I fucking hate the word trigger, but what's going to impact you? What difference is it going to make? How low are your lows going to be? The relationship between us, how is it going to impact what we're doing? How does it impact how you see things and how we're going to play? If you are insecure and you have chronic anxiety or health anxiety, how are you going to feel if we are poly and we fuck other people? How are you going to feel with your insecurities when I start screwing around? I'm not, because I'm actually pretty monogamous nowadays. So it's really difficult to work out what. So I think they're really important conversations that need to take place at the beginning. If you and I are going to play together, so who here is a top? A dom. Who here is a bottom? Anyone a switch? Yeah. Switch! Fuck off! Where are we? You're always in there. Right. Sorry?
We can't make decisions to save our life.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You fucking decided you want both, and that's okay. That's your decision. Listen, I come from that era of bi women. I was on those 80s marches for us being fucking queer. It wasn't glitter. Trust me, Pride's lovely. It wasn't like that. It was stones, spitting, aggression. It was fucking horrific what we went through. Listen to me, the martyr. What we went through for you to have your fucking freedom, you still don't have it, so it's irrelevant. Not in the way we think we do. And thank fuck for the miners, because it was the miners who forced the unions to put our rights through. And that was like, the Northern and Welsh men who were like, fucking bunch of queers, who are you like? And actually, they're the ones that put our rights through for us, the trade unions. Know your history. I'm really strong on that. Know your history about being poly, queer, or like know your stuff. I'm quite religious about that. So it's all about trying to make sure that we are okay and with ourselves. But when it comes to mental health, that conversation to me is paramount in the beginning. If you are a top and you're negotiating with somebody, you'll probably ask physical questions. Have you got any places I shouldn't hit? How are you? So like for me nowadays, I can't feel around here very well and I can't feel under here very well. And my lymph drainage system on my right is impacted. I won't even let someone take fucking blood pressure on my right arm. I'm probably not going to let you bondage or tie me up in some way that's going to impact that, or in fact, bruise me horrifically on the right. I'm much more likely to go for the left. So you've got to be quite good at knowing your left from your right if you want to play with me. So I'm probably going to ask that question. And in reverse, shit, which like, what was it she said? So I come with my own complications now as well, because that's really important. Please do not think that any form of breast play or damage can cause cancer. Oh my God, I get asked that quite a lot. The answer is no. That sort of blunt force trauma cannot cause that sort of issue. It causes other issues. But I do want to, you ask about physical health. All I'm going to say to someone as the bottom, even if I'm a switch, whatever role I'm playing in that moment, or whoever I am as a fundamental, I need to tell you that you can and can't do this shit. So why wouldn't I tell you the same about my mental health? I don't get it. I'm likely to have a panic attack if you play with me. I need to know that. And actually, do you know what to do? Yeah, so like this is great, isn't it? Right, so this is an impact play sheet of where you should hit, where you shouldn't hit. They're not trendy anymore. When I watch things on FetLife, like from Dane and Danes, the whole fucking body is traumatized. No respect for the kidneys, no respect for the spine, no respect for a lot of things, but it looks fucking glamorous and pretty. So it looks nice. Why aren't we also saying, how are you mentally and emotionally? Because actually there are more people with mental health issues than ever before. And the numbers are going up. And the numbers lie. When we tell and say around, 1 in 4 people have a mental health problem. So why is it my personal practice, out of those people, half of them, the doctors don't even fucking know. Believe me, it's not 1 in 4, it's probably 1 in 2. When you look at all the drugs that people take for all sorts of different reasons and what's going on, it's going up and up and up. So I think when you contract or when you ask, I think immediately as soon as you play, so if you're going straight into play or sex, what mental health issues, what emotional issues will impact us playing, and what physical issues will impact us playing? What do I need to know about you in order to make you and me safe? That's the question I ask. So for me, it's immediate. Does that answer your question at all? Or?
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of? What have I missed?
Oh no, sorry, I'm just absorbing. I have
Yeah,
my
I talk
brain's
so
slow.
fast as well.
My brain's a little bit slow on processing sometimes.
Okay. So for me, the simple answer is that if I'm going to play with you, we're going to play, it's immediate. So it doesn't take months. It has to come in there. My third eldest daughter has hypermobility spectrum disorder. EDS, some people call it. So if you, a few people in the room have got it. It's interesting as an illness, but I mean, so for example, she needed a breast reduction. She was a double L, 32 double L. And they were ripping and tearing, so hers impacts her skin. The NHS wouldn't do it, we did it privately. She's better with that. She vomits 3 to 4 times a week, she can't keep her food down, she's permanently tired. Her nerves give her the wrong signals to her brain. So she's in pain when she's not in pain. So something sends a signal to her brain and says, ow. She's often tired, her sleep is impacted, it's really hard. She's doing her degree, she's doing okay. It's taken her a few extra years. She has brain fog a lot of the time. We tried ketamine infusion recently because that's got a 60% success rate, didn't impact the size. You need to know if you're playing with someone with hypermobility, because when you tie them up and they're really flexible, you're potentially dislocating their joints without even thinking about it. She can sit there sometimes and she goes to move like that and her collarbones popped out. They pop all the time. Some do, some don't. We really vary when you've got hypermobility. Hypermobility is in my family, it's genetic. I probably have it on some level. It's probably me that's giving it to her. She has it worse than anyone else. So you need to know that shit. But you also need to know that it does cause brain fog. Frog? What's that? Frog. It does cause brain fog, for example. It does cause, I can't quite think about that. Hang on a second. So we need to take more time when we're negotiating. So we have to really think about these things. So yes, mental health, physical health are straight on. Would any of you disagree? What do you think?
Well, I have epilepsy, so sometimes it's really difficult to tell, am I in some job or am I about, sorry, I call them spazzes, or am I about to go? It's my word.
It's your word.
Or am I going to, so sometimes I go, I have to like take it in, I'm like, you know, and sometimes if I'm not sure, I'm just going to have to just stop the scene, because the worst case scenario, depending on what we're doing, it could cause injury. So it's really difficult when, as the person with that, to go, actually, I don't trust my body. So you have to voice it.
I agree. And if you're the one tying up, if you go into a spaz, I'll use your word, it's not my word. So if you go into that, that person is still tied up and can do nothing. Ranger Gray, I've mentioned her before, she had a really interesting situation. If you've heard me before, you've probably heard this story. She was being tied up in the woods, and the rope top, or the dom who was tying her, had pretty bad diabetes and he wasn't looking after himself. And as he was tying her, he went under, like insulin problems, pulled the rope, broke her jaw, and no one's around to help. He's on the floor.
Yeah, one of my boundaries is someone needs to got one hand free, or there's something somewhere, because
Got your phone or something, or you can talk to your watch or your phone. Hey whatever, make a phone call. You know, because it's really important. Think of these things. And it's the same as a bottom. So like, for example, someone with hypermobility, someone with epilepsy, if somebody fits in a set of ropes, the likelihood of them causing injury to themselves just gone through the roof. Because of the way they're moving in the ropes, because your ropes are never that tight. You think they are, but they're not. When somebody starts having a seizure, the way their body moves in the ropes is a serious issue. And if you are going to tie or be tied, please, I had this the other day, I spoke to somebody, and he doesn't want to carry on playing as much with rope because he was really upset that he had to cut the rope. When you've got to do the rope in front of you, cut the fucking rope. Tie someone up and cut them out of it. Practice. See what it feels like to cut the rope. And I said to him the opposite. I said, I'm really proud that you cut the rope. How fantastic that you did the right thing at the right time. That's what I think is good. Because actually, if I'm going to play with someone, one of the questions I'll ask is, tell me about a situation where it's gone wrong and what did you do? I've never had anything go wrong. It's quite amazing. How do you know that? Maybe you've only been playing for 10 months. But if you've been playing for 5 years, what do you mean you've never had anything go wrong? Never. Seriously. Well, not even in sex. You haven't been thrusting so hard and gone straight into someone's arse. I'm sorry, because that really happens. You haven't snapped your banjo. You haven't had someone fish you the wrong way or cut you inside. You haven't been tied incorrectly. You haven't. My personal story, sorry.
Oh God, there we go.
My personal story.
I'm sorry on her behalf.
So I've got two things that have really gone wrong for me that I'll share happily. One was when a partner and I set up a kidnap, tied a woman onto a St Andrew's cross, and this is an oak bed. So we bought this at a Sexpo, which a friend of mine used to help run. A Sexpo. This is a fucking piece of oak, right? This woman is nearly 6 foot. She's quite Amazonian and she's quite strong. I've got this list of instructions from her dom, because this was the scenario that we agreed. I used to switch a lot more than I do now. I'm much more a cut queen and into psychological play, and I like a bit of a. I like violence. Actually, personally, I like a punch. I like a hit. I like a deep hit. I'm not a sting me type person. So we're all different about what we like. So she's tied. We're doing all this stuff. We've got a very strong list of do's and don'ts. It's a good list. I slap her around the face. It's not on the list. It's fine. It wasn't fine. She broke the bed in half trying to come for me. She broke a piece of oak. And I phoned her Dom and I said, can you help me? She seems to have gone mad. I slapped her around the face, but not mad and she's mental and like she's so livid. I went, fucking hell, I forgot to put that on the list. She hates it. I will never again do something by proxy. Never again. I want to know from you individually what it is you like and don't like. And if you haven't written that, it's a you problem, it's not a me problem anymore. That's what I like to write. I like to text, I like to know. And those things can defend people as well. I've had somebody who, a client of mine many years ago, by the way, if I say anything about my clients, I have full permission to share. I do ask, it's all about consent. I do not mention people I'm not allowed to. So, and this person met someone, she said, I really want to be caned till I'm bleeding and I want to be fucked as hard as you can. Give me a really good time. Like, I would like some blood. He does just that. He wakes up the next morning, she's not there, but the police are knocking at the door. And she had gone to the police saying, he went too far, he made me bleed, that's what she asked for. And he opened up my skin, that's what she asked for. And he fucked me violently, that is what she asked for. And because the police were being pretty good about this at this time, although they brought him in, they saw all the text and they said, this was clearly consensual, she's changed her mind afterwards, off you go. However, that is also not always the case. You break the law by doing what we do. Anyone here ever had a love fight or given one? In your life?
No.
You've broken the law.
Never.
You cannot consent to violence against you, and you may not leave more than a trifling or transient mark. A small bruise, a small hit, or anything. So it's really interesting when you then come to a therapist, because actually you break the law fairly often, and we have to think about that as well. So that comes into it. And the other one that happened to me, so if we go the other way, when things go wrong, is I went to a hotel room in just a coat, pair of high heels, don't wear those anymore. And I was also a lot tinier then. Put a pillow over my head, brought me in, did a lot of stuff, had a good time up until that point. And I feel this weird thing inside my cunt. And I'm like, interesting feeling.
Preemptively.
Yeah, preemptively. And I feel this pull, and I feel this twist, and my coil's ripped out. He put a cooking balloon whisk inside me. And somehow it got the strings. It shouldn't happen because those things don't normally catch. You can feel a coil. If you ever sleep with somebody who has a vagina and has a coil in, you can feel the strings. They shouldn't. I mean, it's just a cacophony of fucking mistakes that happened. But also, if you sleep with somebody who is on the larger side, obesity, and you put a balloon whisk inside them, obesity also happens to us inside. So if you go into the vaginal canal and you put a balloon whisk in, the likelihood of you catching the skin and twisting it and ripping it is also huge. Don't ever put a balloon whisk inside someone. Why did you do that? Was my next comment, as I'm gushing blood and clearly about to go to the hospital because there is no choice. My coil's there as well. He said, well, it wasn't on a list. It wouldn't fucking be on a list, you twat! It's not normal to put a balloon whisk inside someone's cunt or anus. I'm sorry, it's not. But we like to think of crazy things, don't we? So it's quite a good idea.
Just circling back to the terms or to the points of when to negotiate and when you have disabilities, any sort of illness is something that can make the scene go wrong very quickly, very easily. And it doesn't necessarily need to be your fault, it doesn't necessarily be something that you are doing. If you're epileptic, if you turn your neck to the side and you collapse, just tell the person you're playing with, even if it's an event like this, or even if you're going to a house dome, and you know that happens to you, please tell them. Because I've had someone coming to me saying, I want to be strapped up to a slanderous person and get a flow that I've never had before. So you give them the experience, you give them okay, I'll go slow, I'll do this, I'll do that. This okay, fine. When I go to the table and bring another one, the moment that I turn around and I look back, they collapse, strapped to the fucking slanderous cross. What do you do there? What do you do when you don't know, when you're not ready for that, when you're not prepared for that?
I can guarantee you're not prepared.
I knew what to do.
You know what to do. It's your profession.
Luckily for the person, I knew what to do. So it was not a shock. I could snap from where I was to where I normally am and do what I do for a living. However, just tell the person, you may not be that lucky. The house domes very, very rarely are going to say, no, I don't want to play with you because of things.
They just need to understand.
Thank you for telling me. Is there any do you know what's going to happen? Is there any sort of sign that you want to give me? Thank you, let's do this. If it happens, at least I know that. Just tell them. No
Communication is
one should
better
tell
than
you.
none. It really is. Even if you're worried or scared, it's better that the person knows. Because actually, if I say, hey, I've got this problem, and the person says, I don't want to play with you, thank fuck I know that.
Yeah.
Because that's a good thing to know, or they're not capable. And when the only deaths that have occurred in BDSM in the last 3 or 4 years, and there are deaths that occur in BDSM, they're mainly around choking. And one of the major ones that happened a couple of years ago, these aren't crimes. I'm not talking about somebody who uses BDSM as a catch-all. They were kinky. I played with them. They died. I chopped them up into pieces and put them in a suitcase. I think that's more than kink now.
Yeah.
So there was a couple it was Edinburgh, Glasgow. They met. They had a great time. They were both utterly pissed. He choked her. She died. He didn't know what to do. And the CCTV caught him going for a walk for an hour. What do you think you do immediately? 999 on speed dial, like just have it. That's what you do or anyway, so who here is a top or a switch? Do you know CPR?
Yep.
If you don't, please learn it. Please learn it. Because Poppy and I are putting together some weekends. So Poppy is a scene counsellor and she's also my best friend. She's kinky like me and I've known her for 20 years. And she's also a therapist as well. And she's also a nurse. So we are putting together these weekends where we're going to do a beginning to end of how to do kink, what to do. People can use it for, if they're therapists, they get credits for it. If they're kinky people, we're just going to learn from it. And one of the things I'm going to do is cover all forms of first aid that come with what we do. So that's the cutting, that's the stitching, so you can get stitches, you don't have to stitch somebody. There are lots of things that you can do. So we're going to look at all those things around choking and everything else as well to cover all the basics because nowhere does it for us. I'm going to do classes on how to negotiate, what to do and all of those things and mental health and physical health. We're just how to is all about it. Go on.
You referenced that couple that tragic death, really pissed, and you talked about how to try and get that screening right where there's some red flags or something with other people. But in terms of managing substance abuse or addiction within a relationship or yourself, is there any sort of advice?
For me, if you have an addiction, don't play when you're on anything. I'm really sorry. I know drugs can be really sexy and exciting. One of my major fantasies still left is that I'm given some kind of major drug like Rohypnol where I do not remember what happens and someone films it and shows me afterwards. That sounds really hot to me. However, it's not so hot when I have the flashbacks and I don't know what happened to me and I'm out of control, so I'm not willing to pay the price. If you have somebody who cannot drive a fucking car because it's lethal, you are lethal in that car. But you are lethal when you hold someone else's life in your hands. See, what alcohol or most drugs do, if you think of Men in Black, if you haven't seen the film, I apologise, but if you imagine there's a globe of aliens trying to get into us, but we've got this special invisible net over the earth. And have you ever seen the film Men in Black?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I find myself as a weirdo. Who am I kidding? Most nerds are kinksters and vice versa, so that comes into it. But if you imagine, as soon as you drink alcohol, it isn't that it loosens you up, it's that it destroys your capacity to look after yourself. Alcohol is one of the worst drugs out there. If you compare alcohol to any other drug that's on the market, if we decriminalised every drug and recriminalised every drug, alcohol would near enough be number one. Not your crack, not your cocaine, not your heroin, not your spice. Half of those things would not come into it. So one of the things I will say is, please don't play when you're under the influence of something. But of course people do. But it impacts your faculties. So that's the first thing I will personally always say. We have to be aware when we talk about really different acronyms like RAC, so we used to have SSC, which is safe, semi-consensual. So half the stuff we do isn't same, so I don't think it applies. I like PRIC and RAC, which are personal responsibility and risk awareness. As soon as you've got someone who isn't as compos mentis as they could be, you have a very different risk. I remember being in a really nice hotel many, many miles away with a beautiful beach with a certain partner at the time. He'd had 2 bottles of wine. And we'd gone up to the room. I'd had a glass. That's all I had out for 2 bottles. And he was like, he's a big man as well. He was like really saying what he was going to do to me. And I said, no, we're not doing anything. And he went, if you don't do it, you're out the room tonight. And I went, that'd be fine, Molly, I'll go get another room. It like, turn your topping off, not interested, go. If you have an addiction problem or an issue, if it is indeed causing you an issue, go and see someone. Go and get some help and look at why, look at what's going on underneath. Because also, when you look at the intensity of the feelings that are created through play, they can be addictive, for sure. The amount of people that suffered during COVID because they couldn't get their fix of their endorphins and their play was astronomical. I started my online workshops because of COVID. I was doing 2 workshops a week and I was getting hundreds of people in sometimes. And for all these sorts of reasons, because people weren't getting their fix, they couldn't get what they needed, which I totally understand. But then that's not a healthy way of sorting out your issues, is it? If you need to go to Sainsbury's and put your tits in a frozen locker or chest or whatever, or drop your balls in, we've got a problem because you're going to be arrested. That is not the way to deal with it. Pornography isn't the way to deal with it. Masturbation isn't. Drugs aren't. But I also understand why they help. I get it. But again, that's a this problem instead of a this problem. So we need to look at what's going on underneath for that person, why it's there, to try and help. So as a partner, I don't want to play if that's a problem, but I will support you in getting the right help and seeing what we can do about it. I don't know, if you're tied up completely and someone on the other end is so in charge and could cause you harm, do you want them to be under the influence of anything? Just asking, what do you think?
No,
As a bottom, would you be okay with that?
no, that's scary.
I find it scary because you cannot gauge the damage you're doing. You cannot understand the impact that you're having. And, maybe you're using words you wouldn't use before because emotionally it's just bad. Maybe you're saying things you would never normally say before. Maybe you're not, maybe you're not caring about things like that your condom's on if we've agreed to have safe sex. Fucking, I don't care, I'm not going to come anyway. Our faculties are impaired by drug use. And every drug impacts us in some way. So for me, go and get the help. Look at the reason why the addiction's there. Because the problem with all of these things, it's a bit like OCD. The obsession isn't a problem. The cleaning, whatever you do, that's not the problem. The compulsion is the problem. You're avoiding something underneath. We need to work that out. What is it you're avoiding or doing? It's not about cleaning, it's about what are you avoiding. The hoarding isn't the problem, the grief is. Every hoarder has grief. Every grieving person doesn't hoard. We need to look at why you and that. So let's understand you, and it's the same with addiction for me.
Sometimes it's not addiction. I have a connection in Italy, strangely enough. And she.
Well, I'm not going there then now, am I?
She has social anxiety, as well as other things going on, and she uses alcohol as a way to loosen up. And as someone that just feels off, when anything like that, I just feel like in order for you to have sex, you need to drink, and that for me concerns me from my personal boundaries. But like you said earlier, if they're not working on it, then I'm going to back the hell away.
And I also know this isn't a guess, this isn't a throwaway as a therapist. I know that person can change their lives without fucking alcohol. They know they can. I don't know if you two can, but there are things that can be done that can help, that can make a real difference. Is it a catch-all and perfect all the time? No, the person has got to want to do it. My daughter's best friend just got released. And I mean released because 3 years ago, fucking hell, it was Christmas Eve, I took her into hospital. She was 4 stone.
Wow.
She's 5'9". She was so bad. And I asked for her to be sectioned, not as her therapist, she's my daughter's best friend. Parents had had enough of everyone. I stayed there till 2 o'clock in the morning. We ended up getting a section for her. She ended up staying in hospital. I gave up half my Christmas day and I sat with her, and I'm the one holding her as they're forcing something called 40-sip into her tube. She ended up with a nasal tube. It was to save her life. And I'm the one that goes into the bathroom with her and she takes her clothes off and she looks like she's just got out of Auschwitz. As a Jewish woman, that's quite a big thing to say for me. She looks horrific and I'm scared for her life. It's really frightening what she's doing. It took 3 years of her going in and out of various clinics. And I said to her, the amount of time she used her Instagram, she's always got a new best friend. No, you haven't just got trauma in common, it's not your best friend at all. And that can happen quite a lot, especially in these scenarios. A form of bonding, for sure.
Trauma.
Yeah, but, and watching this human, and she got released 3 or 4 weeks ago. She's amazing, she's put on weight. And she said to me, the thing that kept me going is you. Thank you for all the contact and the details. I wouldn't comment on Instagram. I would often just say, fucking hell, you're full of shit, mate. You know, like, look at what you're writing. And I was really horrible to her in many respects, and I didn't have a lot of sympathy. It was quite brutal. And one of the things I said to her was, you've got to fucking want it. You don't want it yet. You don't want to live. You don't want to do any of this. Doesn't matter what I say. You're full of shit. And she said to me, that was the key. I had to want it. And that's really sad to me. So if you've got something, you've got to want to change. But sometimes, even when I see people come through my door and I'm like, oh, this seems like a long time because you ain't there yet. And I make that very clear. I am worried that you don't actually want to do this. I do. It's a very different commitment to actually want to do it and to go through it, to get to this stuff. It's hard. So the person's got to want to do it. Because the alcohol makes it easy. The addiction makes it easy. It's not easy at all. I really understand it's not easy. But it's the rut we're in, which is more familiar. And therefore, we'd rather have the devil we know than the devil we don't. So people do get stuck. And that's the same with addiction and anything else. So I would always come back to that.
Sort of follow on from that, with people wanting the change. So I definitely struggle with is how do we sort of resolve a scenario where you end up leaving yourself more vulnerable to traumatic situations where someone who is false in their promises being like,
I will change.
I know I've done you bad, but I want things to be better. I'm going to do better. And then about 2 weeks later, it gets even worse. And so there's a part of like, how do we deal with that? But then I think another part I want to bring up is, how do you deal with the shame of knowing that you've allowed yourself to be hurt by them again and again and again? Just what's more.
What you allow will continue. It's written on my skin. It's really important to me as a message. It's written in Hebrew. Also, some of my Hebrew has changed slightly because fucking I go to Israel sometimes as a Jewish woman. I don't want to read my shit. So, it's why it's not in English, right? What you allow will continue. When you try and help someone who promises change all the time, not going to like this one, sweetheart, but we have to walk away. Even if they're going to get therapy, if they make promises, how many chances do you give anyone in life? How many do you give? If your person's cheated, how many times? How many times are you going to allow? Because once you've allowed 3 times, 4 times, they just keep doing it.
I just mentioned something that my therapist told me. It's very important to realise that it's not something that you did. It's not you didn't see those red flags. It's not that they weren't there, and you sort of have to forgive yourself and understand that there was no sign that you could see that thing was going to happen. And it's okay. You spotted the red flags now. It's just important to focus on, okay, I can't help this person. I shouldn't have to. They've done this to me, and that's not okay. And sort of realising your own worth.
But we often don't realise our own worth. I always say, for me, red flags. How can you notice a red flag if none of the parts are red?
Yes.
So what we have to look for is texture.
And if you're a fixer,
If you're a fixer, we ain't going anywhere.
Oh God,
Some of us,
you have a problem.
Tell me about it.
some of us are fixers.
How can I help you about that?
So what we-
You don't want my help, I'll still help you.
So what we have to recognise, which is important, is the drama triangle, which is a very commonly used thing, whereby we fall into different characters or characteristics as human beings, which is persecutor, rescuer, or victim. And victims use language like, well, it always happens to me, it's not fair, why do I, and all of that sort of stuff. And so you've got persecutor, you always, you should, you must, you never do, none of that. And the victims have got, well, the rescuers are let me, I'll help you. These are like, when you pick up your phone and you say, oh, I don't know how to do this, Sean, could you help me? Could you? And they just take it and they do it for you and then they give it back and they're confused why you're not saying thank you. I still don't fucking know how to do it. I know you did it, but I've got no fucking clue. You haven't actually helped me. And we get really cross. When you're trying to open a jar and somebody snatches it out of your hand. You don't actually want to snatch it out of your hand, but you need to learn how to say, I can't open this, please, can you help me? The first step is by asking and saying and realising, so welcome. Makes a big difference. Shame is a cunt. When we work with shame, I think cunt's a beautiful thing, but I'm using the word in the vernacular, not so good. The problem with shame is we feel that we are inherently flawed. When we feel guilty, we feel guilty about doing something. When we feel shame, we feel that we are a bad person having done the thing. I can't fix, therefore I'm bad. I've let this happen to me, therefore I'm bad. So we get stuck in a shame spiral where our self-esteem is just not there. So it's almost impossible to use. And the question here for you is you've got to fucking want to, my love. At what point is it low enough for you to hit the floor to say, I'm done? Because you can't fix people. I'm trained to fix people. Guess what I can't do? Fix people. I can't fix you. Only you can. I can help you on your journey. I can be with you side by side. I can maybe make a difference, but you've got to want it. What will make you want to walk away?
I don't know.
Then maybe you need a conversation about that. What is enough to make a difference? Because shame is that feeling of being inherently flawed. I'm not stupid for having done that. I'm a stupid person for having done that. Like, it's not, that was a stupid thing to do. There's a real difference in that. And often in shame, people get stuck in a spiral. Children are taught shame quite notoriously in their families. You know, when someone's like tying up a shoelace and you need to go, you're like, fucking hell, come on, you haven't managed it. Come on, quick, for fuck's sake. Shaming, straight away. Even though we don't realise it, it's pretty shaming. The child will go one of two ways. No, I want to learn how to do that. Or I can't do anything. I can't do it. And shame is a really big thing to think about. I've got a writing on shame. I'll send it to you. It's really good. The only... Bingo.
Put that into the bingo.
You can. I've got a writing on most things. So the problem with shame is, what the antidote to shame is compassion. How do you talk compassionately to yourself to make a difference about that? How do we work with you to say, I have a little technique. I'm going to go to my photos, right? I really understand you can't take photos and I'm not taking a photo. So you can't see it. This is a photo of me when I was about 5 years old. I'm sitting there. I look quite sweet. I think I look quite sweet. I'm young. Quite cute. If I showed you the fact that my sister's there dressed in the same clothes, you would understand half my problems.
Oh, that's really cute.
When you talk to yourself, what do you say? When you have a go at yourself, what do you say? I shouldn't be doing this, I'm a fucking idiot. What do you say?
More of just, yeah, there's not really a lot of words, just sort of like...
No, there are words in there. Even if they're in your head, you're saying
yeah, how, like, sure, yeah, you're a smart guy. How do you let yourself fall into these cycles again? Why do you believe someone when they fail you again? It's like,
do you ever have a go at yourself a bit more? For fuck's sake, you idiot, whatever. Like, you doing that a little bit?
I kind of, yeah.
So say it to her. Say it to her. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
Because I like you.
Because you care. If you won't say it to her or her, your new rule is you have to explore why you'd even think of saying it to yourself. When we work as human beings, we are not linear. You want zero, you want more than zero. So we have epigenetics and genetics, bingo, that create us. You are in utero experience. You, as a human being, you were inside your grandmother. Your eggs were in your mother when she was born. As an embryo, building up your eggs, you were there. Isn't that amazing when you think about that? That's crazy, isn't it? So we have all these incredible experiences like tree rings before we even start. Then we have birth as an experience. Then we have all the fucking expectations that our parents put on us and our life experience. And I'm 57, so I have over 57 rings. That's the way I see it. So if I talk to her like a piece of shit, I'm damaging part of my insides. I'm injecting poison into that tree. That's what you're doing. That's where the compassion comes in. If you wouldn't say it to me, and you wouldn't say it to her, and you wouldn't say it to her, why the fuck are you saying it to yourself? I did a little experiment years ago with some clients. I was also putting on a show, so I used to work with kids who had issues and problems, and I'd put on shows with them. And we were putting on a show called Disco Inferno. I had about 80 kids in the show. And one of the things I bought, fucking hell, I bought all original 70s clothing for it. I dressed all these kids. We've got it going. We even got a proper bike from the time. I got my band on stage, dressed completely in satin shirts with the frills, you name it, we did it. And we put on this show, and it was amazing. And one of the things we had for them to go into Disco Inferno was a big door on wheels at the side, which we flipped around for other scenes. One of my degrees is also in performance and related arts. I used to act, sing, and dance. So when the people came in, they would have those old-fashioned clickers. They still have them now, actually. I noticed in Covent Garden the other day, I was in a restaurant, the guy was still counting with it. You know those little clickers that go up to 999? I asked one of my clients to go out, if they wanted to, and I just wanted them to record their negative thoughts every day. By negative, I don't just mean, you fucking twat, I mean, don't fucking toast, idiot. I mean everything. How many do you think people registered every day?
Couple hundred accounts, isn't that?
It was around 700. That was the average, which means some people went over the counter and some people didn't. 700 negative thoughts. If you speak to that little girl like that and tell her she's a piece of shit and tell her she isn't okay 700 times a day, is she going to grow up okay? You are causing damage to yourself. There are things you can do, and I'll talk to you afterwards, and I'll support and help you if you want it. It's up to you, but you've got to start texting me. It's up to you to ask for it. I ain't just going to give it. You've got to want it.
Guys, quickly promised.
Right, so it's really important that we start to do things that are really positive for ourselves. What we know is that you're fucking lied to by your parents. I'm sorry, but we're 100% lied to. You are lied to because you're told to get an education, get a good job, own a house, go and do all those things that are really good, and you'll succeed in life and you'll be okay. Actually, what we should be telling our kids is, you need to make sure you go for a walk every day. You need to make sure you look after yourself. You need to eat properly. I can't talk. That's not true. I eat very well. My base diet is really fucking good. I just eat a shit ton on top of it. Right? So my core is very good. I definitely eat my 9 a day. I do. And I look after myself, and I definitely drink 2 liters of water every day. So I do those things. So, and I'm still quite fit and capable, so even for my size. So there are other things that come into it. So you need to look at what you eat. You need to look at how you exercise and what you do. You need to go wild water swimming or going for a swim in the sea. We know that stops things near enough, like Alzheimer's and other things. We know that those things are really important. We know that we need to look after ourselves. We're telling you to go and get a job that isn't just 9 till 5, it's actually 8 till 6, and you're killing yourselves. We know that we're all really tired and stressed. We've got it wrong. However, that is also the society we live in, so we've got to learn how to find that balance. We need to start to look after ourselves differently. Again, when I was working on Harley Street, bit of a name drop. By the way, anyone who works on Harley Street is no more qualified than anyone else, even though it charged a shit ton. It was 180 quid to see me there because of the people I worked for, of which I got very little. And it doesn't mean anything, it's just an office. That's all it is. It's just an office. It just happens those people can afford that office. So, people are paying all this money. Again, asked my clients if they would be interested in a little bit of research. Did a little bit of research. Bear in mind that these are people who can afford an awful lot, so these are people who are earning an awful lot as well. What do you think the average hours were that they worked? How much extra do you think they did on average?
It's got to be 60 hours.
6. When you work it out, they were working the equivalent of an extra 7 weeks a year in daytime timing. When you get paid for your job, are you doing your job for 52 weeks a year or 59? And that's even taking it into account holidays and everything else as well. And do you know how much that is extra every day? That's an extra day a week, and that's just done by going into work half an hour earlier, half an hour later, and then taking up half an hour, 40 minutes of your lunchtime. How many of you do that? Most people. So you're actually already overworking. You know that boss that says, it's 5 o'clock, shouldn't really be going? Fuck you. But we're scared, aren't we? We're scared of that corporate principle, but we're overworking, we're burning out. We're
I kick my team
ourselves.
out. I tell them to go.
Good. I'm glad you do, and we should. But we don't, because the English society, English culture, English economy relies on you working for nothing as an extra. That's what we rely on. As a therapist, it's really important for me to stick to time. I love it when somebody does the whole door handle close. We're at 48 minutes. My sessions are 50 minutes long. And somebody says something along the lines of, oh yeah, because my mum died yesterday. I'm like, fucking hell, like, why have you done that? And actually, I'm quite a challenging therapist. And I'll say, It's a very interesting thing. You've just dropped a bomb on me. We're going to talk about that next week and that's why, but we're still coming to a close. It's really important I hold those boundaries. What we're seeing a lot of nowadays is trauma dumping. People write things on. There's somebody I know who does things on FetLife and stuff, and they do things along the lines of, hello, lovely. There is a chair there.
There's a chair here. Yeah.
I know.
Just bring the camera and everything is fine.
Hello.
Hello. It's nice to have you, dear.
Jerry, everyone, Jerry. Right, so trauma dumping is where we overtalk, we share our shit. You know when that person writes on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, in the hospital? Why the fuck do you respond? Oh my God, are you okay? Don't play.
Boring.
If I'm going into the hospital and I write, I'm in hospital, what I need to write is, I'm in hospital, send me fucking good messages, don't worry, it's nothing major, I've just broken my thumb, or I dislocated and broke my thumb a while ago. That, you need to ask what we want, but we don't, and we say a lot about what we're going through because we hope that the world will fix us. That makes you a victim. It's not healthy, it's not good for us.
Send pizza, the food shit in the hospital.
Yeah. I'm always, when I was in treatment, actually, my chemo was shit for me because I ended up reacting every single time. I ended up being neutropenic, I ended up being in hospital for 3 to 4 days afterwards. I ended up feeling really ill. And I would often say, I'm a good Jewish girl, please bring me a smoked salmon bagel. Craving fish, please bring me fruit. I really need it. Please bring me good food. And my sister, every time I'd had it, I used to have to take steroids. And I used to have to inject my stomach. And I had to inject my stomach twice every day because I ended up with 2 lung clots in each lung by my 4th chemo. And so my sister would make me this homemade baking muesli made with homemade blueberry compote and blueberries, everything that she'd made. So for every steroid I swallowed, I was like, 3 of those, that's good. I didn't really want it. Go for a walk. I've got no hair and I feel like shit. I can do this. But it's really complex. It's difficult, isn't it? Because we're not looking after ourselves properly. And that dumping isn't healthy for anyone. It really isn't healthy for anyone. We're asking the world to fix us and the world can't. But again, you have to realise that the world can't and you have to know that only you can.
Just on the flip side of that one, if they do, and you're a positive person, is it then the best thing to do is, do you need anything?
No, I would ignore.
Okay.
Because do you know what? Oh God, that was so brutal, right? You ignore. Why do I say that? Because a person has to learn how to ask for help. And when we come in, what we're coming in, if we say, do you need anything? We're rescuing the victim on the trauma triangle. And then we get cross because they say, no, I'm fine, thanks. Well, I'm not fine actually, because and then you're like, oh God, and we can get annoyed with them. So we end up persecuting, or we end up consistently rescuing. Don't worry, I'm in my car. I've gone to Marks and Spencer's. I bought you 3 cups of rainbow salad, and I've got you this as well, and you'll be fine. And that's what the person wants. I put something out there, and you just rescue me. That's not healthy. As a person, as a human going forward, I know it's nice. It's nice, isn't it? I had a best friend. My youngest daughter was born dying. She was born with something called imperfect anus. God, my life sounds like shit, doesn't it? It's not. And we were in hospital. She had to have an emergency colostomy bag. She had a lot wrong with her, that kid, and she's fucking awesome now. She's an amazing human being, and she's 24 years old. Jesus, it was a hard time. And my best friend turned up when she was 8.5 months pregnant. She turned up in the morning. My daughter's just had an emergency colostomy. My tits are growing up to here because I've got milk coming in like no one else has. I could eat my lunch off my tits at that time, and they're hurting, and I feel like shit, and I've got a temperature. I can't feed her. I have to express, like, it's a fucking nightmare. And it was a horrible experience. She's on drips and everything else as well, and I'm going, I'm dripping too. It was horrible, horrible experience. And this amazing best friend turned up. She was incredible. She was a permanent rescuer, which was lovely. She ain't healthy. We don't talk anymore. We don't talk anymore because she is one of life's victims who causes so much trouble wherever she goes. But she rescues in order to bring you in order to make you feel like you're really close and intimate. And some people do that because they want to feel wanted and loved. Because then it makes us feel all right. If I rescue you, you value me. And if you value me, you're not going to leave me. And that's what we're scared of a lot of the time, that abandonment. Do take that person. So it's really important. I've got a connection here. We've got a relationship. I'm just letting you know. This is, I'm
not just someone just picked and gone, fuck you.
So we have a relationship, not like that, like this. So, it's very important. And I actually, come to see me as your therapist, I probably am like this actually. It's really important that we call people out.
What if we're both kind of rescuers?
Yeah.
So I do that a lot with my friends and they do too.
No, literally work in healthcare.
Listen, there's loads of good books about this. Yalom and all sorts of people write about it. The Wounded Healer. You are responsible for your own healing. Look at why you do it. Look at what's going on for you. Look at what you get from it. Because if you have to do something in order to be loved and rescued, you've got to look at why. And then that will have something to do with your upbringing and everything else as well. You can argue a lot of submissives are quite wounded healers, actually. I would argue that quite strongly. If I serve you and I do everything for you, you've got no reason to leave me and you like me very much. There is an element of that. But DOMs can be like that too, and switches, depending on where you're going with that. If I give you everything you want and I'm doing everything for you, you have no reason to leave me. You know, it's really interesting where we go in the psychology of it. You don't have to fucking investigate that much if you don't want to. Who gives a shit? It's the same with OCD or anything else as well. If you tap the light switch twice and it's not fucking bothering you, who cares? Who cares? You haven't got a problem. However, if you lock your door and go to work and you're half an hour away and you have to go home to make sure you've locked the door, that's now going to start causing you problems. So it also depends on your situation as how much is it causing you a problem or not. And that's the problem with mental health. We think everything causes a problem. It doesn't necessarily. You've got to look at, will it cause you a problem and what does that mean? If you're permanently rescuing each other, you're on the drama triangle, which means you're in a childlike place. So look up Cartman, look at the drama triangle. There's also something called the winner's triangle. So have a little bit of research. KARPMAN, transactional analysis. There's also the winner's triangle, but actually he didn't write, somebody else did many years later in TA as well. And when she wrote the winner's triangle, she looks at having a different form of compassion and trying to do it differently and making offers. It's no good if I snatch that jam jar out of your hand and pop it and open it to you. I have to sit with the discomfort of like, I really want to open that. Like, no, come on, how many of you sat there with someone trying to do something and they can't do it and you're sitting there thinking, I couldn't.
Have to let them do it.
It's really hard, isn't it? Like, I want to go over to him and give him a hug. I'm not going to. If he wants a hug, he can ask me for one. It's up to him.
Please.
It's up to him if he wants a bit of support from a friend, not as a therapist. However, my friendship is quite therapeutic. If you can't get rid of it, it's quite difficult. People say, are you analysing me? And I go, no, you're not paying me. Yes, I fucking really am. Yes, I am. I've analysed you with everything I think is wrong with you, all the things I think you should do. If you want the truth, yes, I am. Don't ask someone if they're analysing you because we go, no.
Yes,
I don't know if you agree with that, but I definitely do that.
Yep.
Well, there's a fucking personality disorder. It's not a bad thing. Personality disorders aren't always a bad thing. I work with emotional unstable personality disorder a lot, BPD as it used to be called. I attract BPD like no one else, but that's because I'm good with it, because I know how to hold boundaries, so that it's not a bad thing.
Actually,
You have those spaces.
I had this question the whole time.
Go on.
If someone's proposed unhealthy attachments like favourite person, and with the dynamics, how do you navigate that and also understand if the attachment you're forming is unhealthy or not?
Right, so attachment theory. If you don't know what attachment theory is, it was around a little while ago. It was very trendy for a long time. However, there is a really good book called Polysecure. So if you want to read about attachments, read the book. If you, yes, you're going to say bingo. I also have a writing on attachment styles and BDSM and DS under some of my writings. Read that as well if you want FetLife. It's really important to understand your own attachment pattern, how it works, and the impact that it can or cannot have on you. Around 50% of the population, give or take, they argue that there are 2 to 3 attachment patterns, but actually in the recent research, they argue there are 20, 30 plus. You believe which one you want to believe. So when Bowlby and Ainsworth looked at attachment theory and looked at the patterns that came from it, over 50% of us have an insecure or an avoidant or a different form of attachment. Only around 50% of us have a secure attachment. When we have an insecure attachment, we're going to hold on for all the wrong reasons. Now, we might avoid for all the wrong reasons as well, because we're scared of being attached. Because if you have an attachment, so I'm going to argue that favourite person isn't just an attachment, it's probably a borderline principle as well. So you've got emotionally unstable or borderline. And it's often misdiagnosed for a lot of people as bipolar, as other things as well. And all of these things shouldn't really have names, but all of these things means, oh, you had a pretty fucking shit childhood and had trauma in it. That's what all these things are. So again, actually, if you're going to go to a therapist, what I'm going to ask them is, so what courses did you do specifically on trauma? Because when you follow a course, you can do 4 years, trauma is touched upon for a weekend. Most of us have trauma problems. Why have you done this 3 months to 6 months or a year perfectly on trauma? Because that's most of our issues. Knowing how to deal with trauma. Have you done a Bessel van der Kolk type course? Have you done something else? What have you done to learn about trauma? So favourite person is a principle of, this is my favourite person, they're the answer to everything. And when you've got emotionally unstable personality disorder or borderline, you've got push me, pull me going on. Fuck off! But don't leave me. Please don't go. Or stay really close, but leave me alone. Yeah. Oh. You know, like Dr. Doolittle's push me, pull me. You're like, I don't know which way to go. What do I do? And if I work with someone who's anything along that spectrum, it's interesting because I can get 50 to 100 texts a day. When I work with someone who's got a UPD, I allow them to text me. Why? Because I've spoken about this a lot in supervision. It allows for a connection to be made because I do become one of their favourite people for a while. And then while you've got that advantage, what you're trying to do is realise that the person can have healthy attachments and healthy unattachments. And actually, when I know they're getting better is when they're only texting me once a week. It's a great indicator. It's really interesting to watch. And you know, a lot can be made. And a lot of people grow out, actually, of EUPD. Most people in their 30s, if they've had it in their 20s, leave it behind. For whatever reason. Maybe we readjust, there are different things that we do, but not everybody does. So if you've got a favourite person in a DS position, it's not so great because of the power exchange already. So if your sub is your favourite person, you really need them, and they're polling and playing with other people, that's going to cause some problems for you. If your favourite person is your dom, they are your answer to everything, and they're going to look after you. Dom I use in every gender right now. So if they're your dom, they are your reason for living, and they are going to save you, rescue you, and make sure you're okay. Again, not healthy. So if that is the scenario, hello you.
Hello. Right.
Yeah, good.
Where's your hair?
He runs the place, he just walks through. Right, so such a nice human being. So it's really important that we understand if that comes into the power dynamic, that it could impact our relationship in some way, shape or form. So understanding what a favourite person means to someone, understanding the power that it has or the disempowerment that it can create is really important. And we also need to name it for what it is. That's really important as well. Let's name it for what it is. Hey, I'm feeling like I'm the answer to all your problems here, or you're the answer to all of my problems. How is this impacting our relationship? What's happening here? A bit like your question around mental health, does this need to come in here? The answer is yes. Because if all of a sudden I'm your favourite person, I'm really aware. Therapists turn around and say, this is an equal relationship. Fuck off. It's not. It's never an equal relationship. How can it be? You come to see me because you think I can make you better. You think I'm the one with the power and I'm going to make it all okay for you. That's never equal. That's a pedestal already. So we need to name it for what it is. And I see a lot of therapists on their adverts say things like, you know, I believe in equality. Yeah, but I think we need to name the inequality at the beginning. That's what we need to do because it is unequal. You want something from me. I want something for you. That's different. And it is a big difference. So I think we need to name it rather than saying the power's really equal. No, it fucking isn't. And if you've got somebody in a DS relationship, the power isn't equal either. It never is, because what you find from a lot of submissives could be attachment, could be EUPD, could be many things. It could also be that if somebody has had some form of trauma that they're fawning, or that they... So when we look at traumatic responses and we look at the sympathetic nervous system and what happens to us as human beings, we talk about fight and flight. They're the ones we talk about. But there's also freeze, and there's friend, and there's fight, and there's flop, and there's foe, and there's fawn. And fawning with a submissive is one of the most dangerous things that we can do. Because as a submissive, if you have trauma in your past and that person is your favourite person, and you start fawning, it's yes sir, no sir, mistress, whatever, it doesn't matter what that particular phrase is. It's, I have to do it, because if I don't, you're going to leave me, so I'm panicking. So the consent isn't what we think it is in that scenario, and that's really dangerous. And a lot of people fawn. So as a top, whether you're a switch, it's irrelevant, if you're topping in that scenario, you also need to be asking yourself, this is consent, this is good. Is this consent? At least have that second conversation. Because if this person is saying, yeah, no, I'll do that, that's really important. Especially if they're your favourite person, that power dynamic isn't what we think it is. So it's really important to understand what a favourite person is to someone, how that impacts them, and how it impacts you. Because actually, if you're a favourite person, it can feel really intense, but it's quite a nice feeling. If you are the fucking business for somebody and the sun shines out your arse, well, then you're quite like that. It's quite nice, isn't it? Feed your ego a little bit. It's quite nice to be everything to someone. Is it healthy in a power dynamic exchange? No. Does that answer your question? I'm sure it's created more questions and you've gone, fuck, in your head. Yes, sorry.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing this. I have empathy, and I do find through sex it does like really heal and
Yes.
connect that trauma bond. But
Yeah.
I found like the person that usually like I find it really fascinating to say a person who's like favorite sexual person that you have sex with, but because like you have friends and stuff. But when that like I've been recently with someone who's like they say I'm not this type and that he doesn't want to even be it, that literally
Destroys.
literally and that's
Destroys.
and that was one of the reasons that I came with you. I love being here. It's like feeling and learning because I've never in my life had that. In the sense like someone saying like it's stringing you along for so many months and you're like, that's it, you're not my type. Like, why then do we have sex and all of that?
Do you know what? Oh, fucking hell. So let's go somewhere else. Yeah, why is a good question? Because I got through sex. That's what. Do I share? I am going to share. So a lot of therapists don't share. I'm quite a big believer in sharing. I've had sex with more towards 1,000 people than 100, right? I've had a lot of sex. I don't feel any shame over the sex I've had. I don't have any regret over the sex I've had. And when I look back, I often give myself too easily, and that's part of submission, or I have done. It costs you now if you want to. I spoke to somebody recently who, he's got such a good radar. Every time I'm single or something happens, he goes, hi Deb, how are you?
That's one of those.
Oh, yeah. Because I went like that because I'm sure my cunt just hums every time my heart sings.
You say that, is that deliberate or just coincidence?
I don't know. He doesn't know because I've got him on silent.
You can hear it.
He talks to me. He really talks to everything. And what happens is he said, would you be willing to meet me halfway? And it doesn't mean geographically. And I said, oh, maybe. Oh, just as much of a sucker for it as anyone else. But then what was interesting is I said, my daughter's away. So my daughter's back for the summer holidays because she's at uni. And I said, I have a free house on Thursday. I probably should have said that, but I'm playing games on as well, even if I'm not doing it consciously. And he said, I'll come over, let's have some fun. Now I expected my cunt to hum and my heart to sing, and they both went and dried up dramatically. And for the first time in my life, what I realised with him was, it's been a very interesting last 5 years, is he was that person. He was that person who I was like, he was that person. And he's the person I asked to fuck me and beat the shit out of me when I had cancer. He's been a very significant person in my life in different ways, for different reasons. It's the best sex I've ever had. It's the best play I've ever had in my life. But at what cost? I'm a big believer in working out the cost analysis and being with someone. And I think I wrote back with, wow, I think my cunt's just shut up. Literally gone, and my heart's just shut off. And this is one of the most difficult texts I've ever had to feel. And no, I don't want to. He went, I'm really disappointed you won't make me halfway. I went, you fucking me and playing with me, the sort of level he likes to play. We're talking about passing out 3 times. Sorry, what do you know about that? I'm an older woman. If you want to do choking and everything else as well, the older you are, the more likely you are to have a brain injury or something else. When you start to hit over 30, I've got a massive piece again written on choking and breath play. It is never safe. Never. It cannot be safe. Cannot be. It's up to you if you want to take the risk to do it. I've done it many a time. I was thinking, fucking hell, I remember last time I was wearing a pair of heels. So I don't wear heels, I do for him. I remember just collapsing to the floor. Luckily, it caught me. I mean, fucking hell. He's a champion crossfitter, so he's really strong and capable, so he could catch me, but I'm quite a lot to catch as well. If my ankle would have gone or I'd have hurt myself, fucking hell, at what cost? No. What are you worth? What does it mean to you? How much connection do you want with somebody? And sex isn't the way to get it. Sex is a form of connection. There are many forms of connection that we have, and there are many forms of love and care. I want your respect before you're allowed to put anything inside me. Right, I'll come back to you in 1 second because you had your hand up as well.
I was just going to say, I always try and remind myself that I'm in charge of my own fun. I can't rely on anyone else to make me happy. I'm in charge, it's me.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw. It's really difficult, isn't it? Because fun is really important. It really matters, and sex is fun, and play is fun, and we get a lot of endorphins, and we get a lot of chemicals from it. And it means a lot to us. It gives us this amazing wow feeling in so many respects. However, at what cost? I'm a really big believer again in that fucking budget. If you add to my life, that's okay. I'm an independent woman financially. Fuck off. I own my own house. Fuck off. Am I successful in my job? Yeah. Fuck off. Are you? What are you going to add to my life? Are you a caring human being? I don't give a shit how much money you earn. I care that you care. I want respect. I deserve and I demand, actually. I don't care. I don't care if I'm 57. I don't care if I'm fat or any of those things. I'm a fucking amazing human being. If you can't recognize that, that's a you problem, not a me problem. And I'm worth more. And this person is particularly beautiful. Of course he is. He's an Adonis. Wanker. Sculpted body. As I said, champion crossfitter. 9-inch cock, and fuck me, does he know how to use it? I've had more than 4 or 5 cervical bleeds from that motherfucker. Can he play well? Amazingly. See, I like all of that. I like the aggression and stuff that he does. But is he worth it as a human being? No. The mind, the brain, everything about that matters so much.
Someone mentioned 9-inch cock.
Only on a bad day.
Oh, if that's the case, that's when we park as men, right?
Yeah, I've seen much better.
Like
My
20
chiropractor has had complaints.
Oh,
It's
no,
been
for 25
medically
years.
validated.
I've never seen it. It is about 25 years now, but I've never seen it. And so I can't comment. And if I haven't seen it, it doesn't exist. So,
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
So it's really important to have our value. And I would say the same to you. When we've had that situation, we give sex as a currency. Sex isn't a currency. Sex is you. When you give away that currency, check your fucking exchange rate. Because I'll tell you what, it's not worth it anymore for half of us. If you want an orgasm and you know how to yourself, you're going to do a much better job than someone else. If you want a connection with somebody else, that's not just about sex. There is sexual connection, but there are many others that we can have that really matter as human beings. And sex is only a very small part of that. The Greeks talk about 7 forms of love. And there are loves that, like long-term people in our lives, connections that we create, family, different things. You can't pick your family, and unfortunately, sometimes family are fucking shit. So we have to find a different family. We have to find people that we do connect with, that will be there for us. But we have to learn how to do that and ask for it too. You were going to say something.
Yeah, I just had a very quick question about if you had any advice. So, the last 2 relationships I've had, there's been dynamics involved in it, but I've always been the favourite person. So I'm struggling to try and set that boundary and trying to sort of get a normal-ish, healthy relationship. And I'm trying to figure that out, and I was just wondering if you had any advice on setting those boundaries or anything.
I think have boundaries before you even go into the relationship. Write them out, work out what you want. Before you start with boundaries, you need to start with your values. Most of us think we know our values. We don't. Your values aren't goals. What are your values as a human being? Start with those. But what I would ask of myself, because like when people come to therapy, they say, this person is doing all of this. I can't change that person. You're the one in the room. We can help look at your reaction, what's going on for you and what that means. So I would ask you, why are you always the favourite person? Why do you attract that? What does it do for you and give you, and what do you want from it? Because even if it's negative, like what we know is there was a lot of studies into babies. Do you remember Romania? I mean, at that time, do you remember that shocking time in, I think it was the 80s, when all the Romanian orphans were having terrible, do you remember that, any of you?
Mhm.
Some of you
Well, I
aren't
don't
old
personally
enough.
remember it, but I've seen the documentary.
Yeah, okay. So what they studied in a lot of these babies, because my sister and I went over to volunteer, we were both over there for 3 months, and what was shocking is you look at these babies, they're so ignored as human beings that they've got very serious brain damage. What we know is if you have a sexually abused baby and a baby who's been ignored, who's got the worst brains? The baby who's been ignored. Because even if that baby's been hurt and violently hurt in any way, shape or form, it is attention. How many children look for negative attention as a form of something because they don't get it? So what we know that ignoring a child is far more damaging to a child than any form of abuse. That form of abuse is the worst that we get. So what we've always got to ask is, and it's shocking, if you looked at their brain scans, it's mind-blowing. There are serious areas of lack of development. They used to call them butterfly brains. I don't know if you saw that on the documentary, if they looked at any of their fMRIs. there were certain areas of the brain and that hadn't even been developed. So those children had to have intensive therapy, intensive care, and intensive connection to try, and their brains did get better. I'm not sure what that even means, but they grew a little bit and made a bit of a difference.
Over half the children who are brought into foster care within Essex alone, about 80% of the cases they're brought in because of neglect.
Neglect, yeah.
Either physical abuse, etc.
And they're worse off, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, we had 3 children come into my parents' foster. 3 children come in with what looked like brown hair, turned out to be blonde, didn't even know what bath was.
Yeah.
100%
Yeah.
the most abuse, the most traumatised kids you see on the ground.
Yeah, they are.
Even nowadays.
It is, yeah, and it still happens. And, you know, we honestly, neglect is the worst form of abuse we can give anybody. So what we have to look, related to that, is what am I getting from this? Because negative attention is better than none. And often you'll find that with bullies, you'll find that with kids who are breaking the law, you'll find that with human beings who push, push, push. So my question to you would be is, what are you getting from it? Even if it's negative, you get something from being a favourite person. When you start to look at that and work on that, you won't attract it anymore. So you have to start with you as well as the others and how that works. I mean, other people might disagree with me, but that's what I would say. Right, we've got to finish, I'm afraid. I'm here next month doing the same thing again. If you want to come back, if you want to follow me online, I'm the King Shrink, capital T, capital K, capital S. I can't spell.
Before you
All
finish,
one word.
next month we won't be the first Sunday of the month, it will be the second Sunday of the month. It'll be the one and only time, so we don't do it on the first Sunday.
This whole place
Please
has
don't
been
come in on the
refit.
first Sunday. It won't be open.
It'll be refit.
Um,
Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you.
And one last final thing, you don't have to wait until September the 11th. Next Thursday
Is that-
evening is your next session, I believe.
Yes, it is. So if you want to ever come to any of my, they're free, they're Zoom. I just send you an invite. You can come along. You can ask any question you want in advance, and I'll answer it. And boy, have we had some interesting questions.
And again, they all get archived on YouTube.
They're put
So
on
if
there.
you
If you're
don't
bored,
happen to be available on the Thursday evening, please go back, check them out. If there is a question that you're thinking, ooh, I wonder if anything has been said about that before, the answer is almost certainly yes.
Yeah.
But the bad news is we're not very good at tagging the archive. So
if you happen to have 500 hours,
Basically, good luck.
start at the beginning.
That's what it means.
I mean,
I know